So crop nutrition is also one of the most common tools. Special about that one is the fact that it's the in-season tool of coming up with a nitrogen recommendation. Unlike the previous two apps, nitrogen currently requires a few more inputs. So as you can see here, it's not only plain and weather, it's a combination of some more inputs of related to soil type, soil depth, planting density, nitrogen at planting, how much you added previously. So these are the information that are needed to initiate and to come up with the recommendation. It's pretty much, the whole app is based on an agricultural crop modeling algorithm called EPSIM that simulates your crop. That means it creates its digital twin to estimate its potential and current weather condition and its potential of what will it need, when, how much nitrogen it's going to need, and how much is the spread of nitrogen that needs to happen in the field, where, which zones need to get what. And it also enables you to interact with that recommendation. So with the nitrogen recommendation, you're able to adjust for the season outlook. You're able to adjust for the economical parameters. For example, you can choose different options of fertilizers, input the pricing, and then think, okay, it looks like urea at that price makes more sense if I want to add UAN 32 at that price. So it gives you that flexibility, that adjustment between the price of the fertilizer, the price of the commodity, if there's any restrictions, volume restrictions that you have on doing any application. And the latest addition, addition to the nitrogen recommendation that we recently released to our US customers is the capability to set your own goals as well, to set your yield goals. So let's go look at it in action. I'm gonna pull up here an example. This is an example field where we are trying to come up with a recommendation for this specific crop. As you can see here in the crop and parameters, you will see there's multiple parameters that you can come here and put: planting density, soil depth, and row spacing. And what it does is that it pretty much, you have the capability now to run nitrogen recommendation on it. And what do I get? I get the variability, I get my zones, spread and labeled from best performing from the yield data, from analyzing the imagery over multiple years for that specific field. I spread my zones from those that has the big potential to those that have the least potential. And then I come here and I can edit my recommendation. For example, I can pick if I want to use urea, that's the price of the urea currently in the US. That's the price of that commodity, spring wheat, that we're using. If there's any restriction on the fertilizer, you can do that as well. You can add it. The season outlook, let's say that it's more of a little bit over neutral, it's not totally wet. Let's say that I am in a position where my attitude towards risk is high risk and I want to maximize my profit. And let's say I want to set up my yield goals after the common practices, after emergence. The agronomist and the grower go visit those fields, and then they're like, okay, emergence is looking great. This is looking like a field that we can push. So I'm going to come here and say, it's looking like we can go anywhere from 50 to 120 bushel per acre. And then you can update the recommendation. And what it does is that it generates new recommendations based on my inputs that I just showed you, of how much pounds of urea I need to put in each of those zones. And you can also, in this case, export it to KML. You can open that and have those different zones with the different nitrogen recommendation. This is in brief. Again, this was the latest addition that we added to the US this growing season, which is the capability to add the yield monitoring, which I am personally very excited about. Okay, so how is it delivered? It's real-time recommendation. So if you want to do a nitrogen addition on, for example, in this case, this is the result on the 28th of April. What you have to do, you have to go, you have to pick the date, and then you generate the recommendation. Two questions were common that came from that came in after our nitrogen session. One of them was, how does an agronomist use the nitrogen tool? And then how do you make sure it's relevant to your local soil type? I'll answer the first one briefly. The workflow is as follows. You need to log into the platform. You set up the parameters like I showed you, and then you're able to generate a shapefile that has a nitrogen prescription per zone. This is updated daily. So you go to the date. For example, I know that tomorrow morning I'm going to spray my fields. I wake up early. I click on the date and I generate a map. Tomorrow, the following day, it's going to be another recommendation. So it's generated every day for you. Okay, that's pretty much what I want to answer that question. And how do you make sure it's relevant to the local soil type? The good news is we've actually deployed the soil type lookalike in Australia this year. The model, the APSIM model, fetches the soil type based on the government supplied soil maps. And then you can either leave it at that or provide your agronomical knowledge and set those soil types yourself. If you have actually done soil sampling and you have a different result, you can update it. But the base is pretty much automated. For our US customers, this is something that we will be talking about very shortly. We have a pretty big announcement coming about the nitrogen and fetching soil data. So just stay tuned. I'm not allowed to share yet, but we'll let you know very soon about the advancement that's coming about soil types for the US customers.